I want to talk to you about this because you're the attorney at the table. When you look at this, I guess what people are looking at here is saying, well, who then watches the watchers? Because the federal government had put a consent decree that was agreed upon by the police department there. I've spoken to the mayor. The mayor says, look, we are going forward with the reforms. The police department is going forward with the reforms. But in some cases, with the federal government sort of backing off, it sort of says to the police department, you do you.
Yeah, the Trump Justice Department saying, we're not going to go forward with these anymore, even though these are court-approved agreements to monitor police departments all over the country who were under investigation or who were allegedly engaged in misconduct, police misconduct. So what's the harm of keeping the oversight in place? It's absurd to withdraw it at this point. I don't really see any reason why the government would need to back away from this other than to make a veiled statement that I'm going to side on the police's side. It's not a good message to the public. And the Trump administration is arguing that this isn't necessary anymore, and these consent decrees are monitored by these outside third parties, and these people who are monitoring it are anti-police, and we don't want those kind of people around. And the police are very happy about this because they believe the consent decrees are making relations difficult with the local population because it's putting a stigma on the police department that they're, corrupt and they need to be monitored. But what's the point of not keeping a monitor on something that's moving along? So there's extra oversight. As long as the police are behaving, what's the difference if somebody's watching over them or not? Everything is working properly. So why not have a little extra protection considering all of the incidents that have been occurring across the country over these past few years involving alleged police misconduct?
Chuck, what's the message? What is the message being sent by the Trump administration?
I am not a lawyer, but I have hired a lot of lawyers. And I'll tell you this for a fact, is that we should mention that with this going on, that black voters, Latino voters voted Democratic. But Donald Trump performed better with those two demographics than any Republican in history. Yeah. And there's a reason for that. There's a lot of frustration in the community. But this, coupled with lots of other things, in my opinion, erasing black history from lots of things in our history as a total, political consultants like me, you can say it's right or wrong, but I will use this to try to get some of our black voters and immigrant voters and children of immigrants back voting this way because they voted for him not because of this. They were frustrated about economic needs and other things, right? But this draws a clear line in my business, which is just about contrast, to sometimes we do it to a fault and we do it too much. We should look for a lot more things that bring us together, but this is something that's really different.
Yeah, so I'll say that this is something that I've been reporting on this for years, on the issue of consent decrees. Yeah. The Republican Party and conservatives, well before Donald Trump, have been against consent decrees. Yeah. If you go and look at the number of consent decrees around the country, most people, when they think of consent decrees, they think of police. Well, consent decrees are actually with local governments, cities and everything, they're agreed upon. And I think the overwhelming majority of them are not dealing, like the consent decrees aren't dealing with police. If Democrats, and this is something that I've talked about, and in fact, if you guys want to go and watch Jamil's podcast, we did a podcast.
Yes, my YouTube channel.
A couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, we did.
And I just want to point this out. Now, while you're right that some cities are going to continue to do exactly what they do as far as reforms, if the Democrats were serious about police reform, they would have voted in favor or allowed the Justice Act, which was the Republicans' component to police reform in June of 2020, which was introduced by Tim Scott. It had the support of every single senator, Republican senator in Congress. If Democrats had allowed those reforms to go to the floor for a vote, we may actually have a police reform package, but they filibustered it. They filibustered that bill and one of the sticking points. You know what we were arguing about. You know why, though. Points in that bill was qualified immunity.
Correct.
But there was
kind of a big one.
Yeah, but let me tell you why it was less important. If you go and look at the actual bills, the Justice Act and the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, those bills overlap by about 75 to 80%. So what the resistance said is because we could not get consent decrees, it doesn't matter that we agree on 75% of things. We couldn't get that one thing, and they decided to table the bill. We could have had police reforms if Democrats had decided to play ball with that.
But what they didn't want was something that looked cosmetic. And unfortunately, what we see with this rollback from this administration just falls in line with a lot of things that we saw post George Floyd. A lot of companies, a lot of celebrities, people putting up the black squares, all that jazz. Knew it was performative then.
Virtue signaling.
Yes, it was, because at the end of the day, if you really want this change to be lasting, to be permanent, to be something that forces us to reimagine how we police in this country and whether or not there should be different layers of accountability, then you stick to your guns. So from this administration, I'm not surprised at all. Yeah. The worry, though, is, as you said, what's the harm? The other thing is these things, I think they send a message to the public. When you have them in place, consent decrees, it allows the public to regain that trust. Like, let's be honest,
that somebody is watching.
That somebody's watching. 2020 especially was a bad year in terms of policing and between Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, all of that. It was a continued thing. And if you're the police, what you do want is to reestablish public trust. The best way to do that is to tell people, hey, we're willing to hold ourselves accountable. You as a police officer, you have a lot of power. You want to hold everybody else accountable, but you don't want anybody else holding you accountable. That, to me, is a scary prospect, especially when you have people with that much power.
Right. And
so to me, it would have helped their reputation to keep this in place.
And I was just going to say really quickly, Trump ran on law and order. So what's wrong with a little order in police departments that are not in great shape? So, to me, this is another veiled political message of just going against one side of the country in support of these messages.
Oh, and then
it's all veiled.
And then the bad optics of doing this right after this Ashley Babbitt settlement. Right.
But what you call rolling back, the administration sees as standing with their supporters. I mean, go back to the campaign, and you had a flood of police associations that endorsed Donald Trump. You had the FOP, you had associations in Michigan and Milwaukee, battleground states. You had the Police Benevolent Association right here in New York, which, far as we know, had never endorsed a candidate for president of the United States. And the way they see it, you write down numbers, I write down long quotes. I won't read the entire thing. But essentially, the executive director of the FOP said that consent decrees don't make any material positive difference in the relationship between police and communities. This is what they were looking for, and Donald Trump is responding to that.
But that might just be a talking point, because having somebody monitor a situation as drastic as, police departments not complying with proper arrest procedures or not carrying out their job in a safe manner with the public. All these things that have gone on, it doesn't happen all the time. There are some bad apples. There are great police officers, and of course we should be supporting them, but there's just no harm in continuing monitoring something and making sure things stay on track because it went so badly off track.
Also, the public feels like they have somewhere to go if they feel like the system is breaking down. And so that is one of the things that consent decrees do. Maybe they don't make huge changes, but it does give the public a sense that they have somewhere to complain, not to the department itself, which they don't at that time trust. All right, Stacey Schneider, thank you so much for your expertise. Everyone else, stay here, hold on to your hats, especially yours.